The Honest Money podcast is powered by 10x Investments, a licensed financial services provider. Consult with your financial advisor and let's 10x your future together.
Welcome to Honest Money. I'm Warren.
I'm Pieter Villiers.
Today we're talking about how you pay a financial advisor and maybe a little bit of history and a little bit of breaking down some of these titles and categories and who fits in where and what. So sit back and relax. There's a little bit of a history lesson and then some ideas about where the industry is going and what are the options available to you when you are consuming advice. How do you do that in the way that suits you? And maybe just to say, it's one of those tricky subjects because, again, I don't think there's necessarily one answer for every question. I think it'll depend on how we feel, what we do, what we require, what work we put in, and the like. So, I mean, just to say that the financial planning industry as it is today, you might have a view listening to the show to say that you think all advisors are sharks, and I hope you don't. But if you do, obviously that's your opinion. Might be based on experience, and certainly my experience is that the industry it does have some bad actors, but certainly many fewer than we saw 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and 30 years ago. And I've been in the industry nearly 30 years, and in the early days, this is now the late 1990s. Pretty much everybody who considered themselves, who called themselves a financial advisor, and that was the term that a lot of them used, financial advisor, would be paid a commission. So what they would do is that they would sell you a product. They would sell you a retirement annuity. That was usually the one, because that, if you were 25 years old, you were sold a product that you could only start accessing when you were 55. So it was a 30-year product, and they would get paid an upfront fee based on 30 years worth of money that would be invested in there. So it was extremely lucrative for the insurance salesperson or the so-called independent advisor who was just getting paid very big upfront fees to sell you that product. We saw lots of endowments in those days because they were 5-year products, and so they also had these big upfront fees. And still in those days, and unfortunately that's still the case today, life assurance, disability, etc., had the same kind of model. Lots of upfront weighted payments and not so much on ongoing payments. And I must say, from those days, what ended up happening was we saw more and more unit trust-based products being sold, less and less pure insurance-based products. So now, as the industry evolved, you could start buying a retirement annuity or an endowment or a standalone unit trust. All of those kinds of products would be on a platform, some kind of a linked investment service provider platform. In the early days, what happened was you could then charge an advice fee upfront. So you could say, someone's going to invest 100,000 Rand and they're going to pay me 30,000 Rand. Well, that would be a ridiculous fee. 3,000 Rand as an upfront fee. And then they're going to pay me 0.5 or 1% a year of the value of the investment as an ongoing fee. That became the most popular model, especially with more and more independent advisors. So independent advisors realized that the sort of heavy upfront commissions, especially on investments, wasn't great. No one really liked that model. And they tried to find a way of charging smaller upfront fees and better ongoing fees. The reason that worked for clients especially was the remuneration of the advisor was based on ongoing fees as well. And that meant that if you were unhappy with your advisor because they never spoke to you and you fired them, they couldn't earn an ongoing fee. So there was a little bit of an alignment of interests there. Industry evolved quite a lot since then. And now we see, if you're using unit trusts or exchange traded funds, there is almost no remuneration paid to an advisor upfront, unless it's a completely separate agreement where you've paid for a fee for a plan or something like that. It's not usually deducted from the investments. I think it might still be allowed. It is still allowed. But gee, I mean, heavily discouraged, and sort of a lot of the professional financial planners would frown upon that as a practice. So now the bulk of the financial planning industry, where you see professional financial planners, they will be earning a fee based on the size of the assets that you have with them. If it's for investments, and if they're professional financial planners who sell you life assurance or disability, etc., there isn't really a great ongoing remuneration model there. It's still a lot of the time done on paying upfront fees. And I don't love that model. I would prefer that we see life assurance and disability and those kinds of products being sold in a similar way to how we see short-term insurance. In other words, that you are paid to deliver ongoing service and ongoing implementation. Unfortunately, this is maybe where Pieter and I aren't 100% on the same page. I'm one of those people that specializes in investment advice. So I guess Pieter would say I have no idea of the complexity involved in doing a disability and life assurance plan for somebody, because there is a huge amount of work involved in doing that. And so there should be some kind of a bias to paying those fees for the work that's done upfront. And I get that there is. I'm trying to win the argument with Pieter before it started. He let me speak first. But I think that's maybe the one area where I can see a lot of argument for even if an advisor works for an insurance agent and they are doing life and disability insurance, it is a lot of work, no doubt. And so getting those kinds of policies implemented, if there is a front loading of fees there, I get it. But for investments, I know that you can buy a retirement annuity or an endowment from an insurance company, and the agents can get paid those fees upfront, and I think some so-called independents could do the same. But for me, I find that very hard to stomach. I think that it's prejudicial to smaller investors. Having said that, that space still exists for a reason, and that's because smaller investors maybe can't afford to deal with a professional financial planner who might charge a much higher fee or have minimums. And so access to advice, they call it democratization of advice.
Yes.
Long word for me. Democratization of advice is difficult, and so that's where the upfront fees are. But where we are today is we've got some new kind of remuneration models that are, not new as in a month or a year old. They're probably a few years old now, but the industry is moving on again.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, thank you. That was a very good, thorough explanation of how the industry evolved. And yes, I think we always have to think about the environment that we're in South Africa. It's a very kind of diverse environment. The wealth gap is so massive between the rich people and the poor, and that creates different segments of the market that needs to have access to services and products and different remuneration models to make sense in those environments. So those old commission kind of policy-based investments that neither of us like at all, we understand why they still exist and probably going to continue to exist, because that does enable people that maybe are not able to, they don't yet have large amounts of investments that an advisor could earn a fee from, or maybe they cannot afford a professional advice for a good financial plan. The advisor can still get paid a certain amount upfront of that policy, and that gives them access to an advisor. Now, we also understand with those investments, if we go look at the EAC, the effective annual cost, you'll see quite high fees. You'll see upwards of 5%, 6%, 8%. The other day I saw one of 66%. I don't know how. Don't ask me how that's legal. I don't know.
It's immoral though.
It's criminal. It's predatory. But the reason why those fees are so high is because the upfront commission that advisor earned, the investment company or the insurance company didn't pay that out of their good heart. No, that gets recouped from your investments, especially in the initial years. And the problem with that, or the potential issue with that, is if you're going to pay a lot of fees in the beginning, that means you're going to earn effectively less returns. And that opportunity cost over 10, 20, 30 years, that could be massive. So I think we all need to understand why these products exist, and probably going to continue, because they do enable some people access to advice, although we don't particularly like it, just because of our very dynamic environment that we have. It's cool. So now we've talked about AUM, so assets under management fee. That's where there's a percentage linked to the investments, with the main idea with the advisor's interest being aligned with the client and keeping them, I guess, accountable to an extent to continuously delivering a service, at least that once a year checkup. And for the client, you as the client, to be happy paying that fee and getting hopefully more value than what you pay. Now, we are now at a point, and South Africa is always behind with everything, like at least 5 to 7 years, but a fee model that is now quite popular overseas, the US, Australia, the UK, is a flat fee or almost like a subscription model. So what happens then is, instead of taking upfront commission on insurance products or investments, the advisor could default that to 0%. So no upfront commission, which usually results in the insurance side, like long-term insurance, to be a lot cheaper, because that commission that advisor earns is also baked into your premium. Sometimes it could be 20 to 30% less per month. And if you're young and you take out insurance policy, 30% saving over 40 years is massive.
It's big money.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
So they don't take commission. They don't take sometimes even a percentage of investments. You and an advisor agree upon the scope of the project that you want them to help you with. Maybe it's a once-off financial plan where they do a full kind of like an audit of everything and give you advice on what you need to do to change. Maybe they even help you implement that, but then you're off on your own again. You continue on yourself, and there's no ongoing relationship. It's more like, I need help with this, help me, I'll help you, off we go. And then you pay them, then usually that would be like an invoice, an EFT payment. Or maybe it is doing that same thing, but you want ongoing access to advisor. And then it will be through a subscription model. So the same way you pay your Netflix or your Showmax or your DSTV, you pay your advisor. And that could be a monthly debit order, it could be an EFT. It could also be sourced from your investments. That's usually the easiest way to do it, because the system is built around that model. But then it is on your terms. So, for example, in most of those models, you can cancel the subscription with a 1 month notice. Very, very similar to what you understand of a Netflix or a Showmax. So that new model, I think, is very attractive to a younger audience that has spent a lot of time to educate themselves, and they can do most of the investment stuff. And in the previous episode, we covered what type of personality would be suitable for that. But they do understand the value of advice, and they may just want to have that check-in, that once a year or once every 2 years, and pay the advisor fee. And they know exactly how much they pay and what they get value from, but it will be on their terms. So it's a model, and I think, as the financial industry evolves and as different client demographics evolves, new fee models will emerge, and they will be suitable to certain people. So I don't personally think there's a specific model that's better or superior than the others. I think there's some that might be a little bit more aligned to the advisor than the client, especially with the commission stuff, but we know why they exist. What I think is most important is to have full transparency in this relationship, to understand what is it Mr. Advisor charging, and how am I as the client paying, and the value that I receive. And the way that the advisor sources that fee is in my opinion, a little bit irrelevant, as long as you understand how much that is and how it's affecting you. Now, I will say that the financial industry likes to make things complicated, and fees are oftentimes hidden. So you need to have that open conversation with your advisor if you don't know what you're paying, and they need to be willing to explain to you in simple terms, transparent terms, what you are paying. And if they tell you this is for free, then that's probably your first red flag, because nothing in life is for free. If something is for free, either you are the product, or you're being lied to, or you're going to spend a lot of time trying to fix problems that could have been prevented.
It sounds like the difference between Netflix and Facebook.
Yeah.
Netflix, you're paying, and Facebook, you are the product.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's important to understand the fee that you pay, and your advisor to explain to you. And it depends also on the firm's, the advisory firm's outlook, how they want to run a business. If they prefer more of an ongoing type of model, or they want to have more fee for service. It depends on that preference as well. So I don't think there's a specific right or wrong. I think it depends on you as a client, what your needs are, and what services are available, and how you would like to engage on what terms. And then to find a firm or an advisor that aligns with those needs, and having that full transparency on both ends.
Yeah, I think. I feel. You're such a diplomat, Pieter. I feel a violent reaction to people that are charged, heavy upfront fees on insurance based investments.
Yeah.
It bugs me a lot, and I understand why they exist. I'm not sure that they have a need to exist. I mean, I think I would love to say, if we're sitting here in 5 or 10 years' time, and that those have been banned, what should happen is that a client and an advisor, even if it's a younger client who doesn't have the assets, they should be able to sign an agreement between themselves, the advisor, and let's say the insurance company, to say, on this RA, I'm agreeing to pay you a fee of 2,000 Rand a year, whatever it is, and it's Rand a year, and it's going to go up with inflation for the next 5 years, 10 years, and that's in exchange for service, because I think the problem with a lot of these upfront loaded products is that someone sells you a retirement annuity, they get paid, the agent gets paid up front, and that's the last time you ever see them.
Yes. Yeah.
2 years later, you say, well, I haven't seen that, that agent, take them off my contract. It has no financial impact on the agent because they got paid all their fees, I think, right up front or over a 2-year period. So I don't like that model. I think for the rest, I think you're right. That if you pay someone a monthly subscription or an hourly fee or a fee for a plan or a percentage of assets, the most important thing is transparency. You should know before the time. If someone comes to me and says, would you like the latest, greatest 4x4? I mean, I'm a car person, so I probably would. But the next question I'm going to say is, how much does that cost? If it costs 2.4 million Rand, I'm going to say, thank you. I would love that when it costs me 800,000. But I'm not prepared to pay 2.4 million Rand. It needs to be one of the first parts of a conversation, not something that you find out 2 years into the deal. That's really bad. So I think that the transparency is key, and also how the other things. What benefits do you get? So a great question to ask an advisor in this situation is, okay, you're telling me that that I'm not paying you. You're telling me that you're getting paid by the product provider. So do you only work for that product provider? Because that's the other thing here. Those in my language are called agents. Those are insurance agents. Are all agents bad? No, I'm not saying that. They should be 100% transparent. They should sit down with you and say, I need to tell you that I work for XYZ insurance company, so I can sell you all of their products, and I will choose the thing that's most appropriate for you within that range. But I may not sell you company B, C, D, E, F, G's products because they don't pay me. I only get paid by this company. If that's transparent, you're making an informed decision to say, well, I think you're a good person. I think the advice you've given me is good. I think we connect well. I'm happy that you do that. That I don't have a problem with. That would be qualified as a good agent. But if you're dealing with a company and their answer to every one of your questions and every one of your problems is their company's products, and it's for no other reason, you haven't been told that, that for me is a real red flag. I don't like it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. So I like that. I mean, I like the idea of transparency. I like the idea of full disclosure upfront, and then agreeing what you're getting for that. That it's not just a meeting, or it's not just an email. It's like what value? How do we make my life? If I'm the client, how is my life going to be better dealing? And those are nice questions to ask. You should feel comfortable when you walk out that you've been given good answers and that you are going to get value. If not, the other advice.
Yeah, fire or seek better advice. and that's I like that what you mentioned earlier. Charlie Munger used to say, show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. So the problem with the commission-based model is it incentivizes sales. It incentivizes a commission, because if an advisor knows I'm getting upfront commission for selling these products, and then I will get paid and I don't have to worry about maintaining. That drives those type of behaviors of trying to sell and having a transactional relationship, which is it's a bit of a recipe for disaster for ongoing type of service. So in my personal view as well, I hope that these products cease to exist, but I know that it's more complex than that, because in South Africa's environment and the regulation and everything that changes, maybe we'll see a day that happens. I'm not sure. Personally, I would want to keep it as transparent and as simple as possible, and to make sure that the value that's being added is in excess of the fee. And the commission-based products makes it very difficult to really understand the fee. These products are designed by very clever actuaries that looks at very complicated models and then determine a fee. And at least now we have transparency, or to a certain extent, as to what those fees are. That wasn't always available. Regulation enables that. And there's a big regulation coming into play soon, the COFI bill, that will probably make that even better for us, or for you as consumers. So yes, different models available that you can pay. And I would like to see a future in the industry where, there's always going to be strong opinions on all the different models as to who think it's the best. And in my personal opinion, I don't really care. I've got the way that we do financial planning, that we charge is based on our personal preferences on how we want to build a business. And that's for every advisor. But I do see a future where firms have different options available, where they tell you, Mr. Client, you can pay us from your assets, you can pay us a flat fee, you can pay us for a once-off plan, and then you can make that choice, and you've got control over how you would like to engage. That is where I want to see the industry move towards, and not to necessarily, because I don't think any of these fee models would be sustainable on its own. I think we need all of them, or most of them, hopefully not the commission ones, but yes, they are there, to try and service as many South Africans as possible. But I do think the gap, the advice gap that we sometimes talk about, can be solved through education. And for people that may not have access to a good advisor, some firms have minimum requirements, a minimum fee or minimum assets, and they don't want to be sold those commission products. You can probably educate yourself to start your own investments. And there's a couple of key things that you need to know. And you don't have to pay for someone to give you advice then. Rather avoid those expensive products and teach yourself how to get started. And then later on in life, where you're at the point where it makes sense to consult a professional advisor, then you pay them the fee, which is just fair. Everyone deserves a fee for a service. That's how the economy exists.
We said so earlier on the show that if you're not paying, and then you might be the product. I guess the one exception to that is honest money, right? So no one's paying to listen to this, but we'll tell you the sponsors are paying so that you can listen for free, and that's part of the financial education. Yeah. We want you to get the information to make informed decisions. And I mean, we're not going to talk much more about financial advice, at least for the next couple of episodes. But the one thing to say there is, like we've mentioned in previous episodes, when you're getting a will, it's an important decision. Pay for that, and when you've got to sign legal agreements, pay for those. And I think the same with advice. If you're going to get advice, don't be afraid to pay for good advice to a good advisor. I think good advice does have an enormous impact on people's lives when it's appropriate. So don't go for the thing that says, okay, well, this is advice free. The company's paying the agent. That for me is not the same. You've got to be clear about that. You are always paying, and it's okay if you're getting value. And that's been the thing, that there is a link between good outcomes and good advice, but it's transparency. And then a kind of a proper value for the advice that you're paying for. And if you're not getting that, move on. And for me, I don't have much more to say on the topic for today.
Yeah, and just to add to you guys watching Honest Money, or listening or reading the blogs, the content that we put out, we put out for free. So as long as you have internet connection and you can hear us, then you can listen it. But you are actually paying with your time. You're spending valuable time listening to us, and hopefully that is time that is well invested. So sometimes we have to reframe our thinking around when is something an expense and when is an investment. An expense is something that you have to pay. You have to pay rent, you have to pay for food, you have to pay for medical care and all of that. Investment is actually paying for something that has a much bigger return later on in life. And I think financial education is one of the best investments you can make. Time investments, sometimes money investments as well. And paying for good advice is an investment, I do believe, because it's either hopefully going to save you a lot of money, maybe a lot of taxes usually, if you consult a qualified financial planner that can look at everything, or to avoid big mistakes as well, especially early on in life. Not taking out expensive products that's going to cost you a lot of money and result in reduced returns over time, or even sometimes making decision on buying a house that's outside of the scope of investments and all of that. but someone to look at your overall picture and tell you, yes, you can afford this, or no, this is a bad decision. Because once you've made that decision, you're going to be left with that consequences for many times. So see advice as an investment rather as an expense, but it has to make sense, and you need to understand what that will look like and what that service level agreement would be, and be fair. I think that's also quite important.
Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing. If you have, if you haven't, please subscribe. It's free, like we just said. And we look forward to bringing you much more content in or context into the future. Please don't forget to send us your questions, and you can put them in the comments, and we'll try and answer all of your questions.
Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next episode.
Bye-bye.
The Stradivarius violin is considered to be the most emotive instrument in the world. That's why you'll often hear it in investment ads, adding drama and the utmost importance to their philosophies, or for the announcement of a fancy new fund manager. 10x investments don't need dramatic instruments to seem impressive. They let the results sing for themselves. So 10x your future without the drama. 10x is a licensed FSP.